I'm not going to use words like secret or hack, but I'm going to use a very boring one and say, I'm going to show you probably one of the most powerful routing options in a DAW. Isn't it annoying when you are trying to send off a mix to a client and they have different needs for different deliverables? This routing is going to fix all of those problems so that you're going to open up your export window and you're only going to export one time. Let me show you the routing I'm talking about. Here is a session that I've just imported stems into for the sake of explaining this. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is create individual summed buses for each of the stems. By stems, we'll make sure I clarify. Stems are a summation of one type of instrument, and multitracks are individually unaffected recordings. So a stem would be drums, multitracks would be kick one, snare top, snare bottom, just so we can distinguish the two. We're going to group all of these into their little subgroup stems. So right here, these are the drums. They're going to a drum bus. This is the bass. And you don't have to do this exactly the way I do. And you'll see what I mean in a minute, because this honestly can be different for everyone. I like having these sum tracks because sometimes people just want stems for, say, their live shows. They want stems for, I don't know, just playing around, giving them to the public as like a product to sell, something. I'm going to highlight all of these summed buses, okay? And then in Cubase, I don't know if your DAW will do this, but most DAWs have a way of organizing your mix console. Sometimes you can just open up a separate mix console like Mix Console 2, and you can just select what individual channels will go on Mix Console 2. In Cubase, though, I can organize these based on where they are. And so now I've made all of those summed buses be put on the right side here. So right now we have all of these summed buses, you know, drums all the way to just the outboard effects, and they're running into our stereo master bus. We're going to change this up to where this master bus is no longer going to be treated as the final master. Instead, it is going to be our monitor. Let me explain what that means. So I'm going to go ahead and name it monitor here, and just MON. And that means that whatever comes out of this bus is just what we are hearing. It doesn't necessarily have to be the mix. So I'm going to highlight all of the summed buses here, okay? So all of the summed buses, and I'm going to group them together, and I'm going to call it mix, okay? Now we have created an artificial mix bus, all right? And I'm going to route the mix bus to what I'm going to call the master. Now this new auxiliary send that I created is the master bus. And then I also like to have an instrumental to be able to deliver to my clients sometimes. So I'm going to take all of the summed buses that equal the instrumental. In this case, it's just going to be the drums, bass, guitars, keys, the percussion, and the sound effects. And I'm going to put that in a bus called instrumental. Now, for color coding's sake, I'm going to give the buses here their own little color scheme. What we're going to do from here is probably where you're going to deviate from what you know when it comes to routing. And what we're going to do is we're going to take every single one of these summed buses, right? So the stem buses and then the individual mix buses, and we're going to delete their routing. So they are not outputting to any one bus. So the drums that are going into the drum stem here, they're not going to any of the buses. They're not even going to our stereo out so we can hear them. Instead, we're going to set up a system of sends, just like you would like a send and return on your hardware. For all of these instrumental based groups here, we're going to send those to our instrumental bus. And we're going to do that at a specific volume. If you do this in like where it's zeroed, so exactly what's going into these buses is going into your instrumental, sometimes that summing can create clipping. By sending it at a -6 dB, you are sending half the volume of that signal into these buses. That's going to give you a lot of headroom. This is very effective if you're working in loud genres. Say you're working in metal or you're working in some kind of very extreme EDM or something. We have all of the instrumental sends going into the instrumental bus, and for the vocals, we're just going to send that into our mix bus. Actually, I'm going to change this. I'm going to put the mix bus here, just so it's clean to my eyes. The instrumental bus is half the volume of all of the stems, which means we can send it to the mix group over here, but at full volume. it can be sent at 0 because it is already halved. And then the vocals, they're going to be sent at -6. And then the effects here, they're just going to go to the mix bus. So now we pretty much have all of the instrumental stems going to the instrumental bus, which is then feeding the mix bus. And then the vocals and the effects are also just feeding into the mix bus. Now we send the mix bus to the master bus like this, not the actual master bus of the DAW. We're sending it to the master portion, the master auxiliary send. But why go through all this trouble instead of using the regular in and out, the regular IO in your DAW? Here's why. If I pull up the export window in Cubase, I can now select to export the mix, the instrumental mix, and the master. Let's say you work for a label, you're mixing or mastering for a label. They're gonna want a lot of different things. Like, for instance, you don't just have the drums and bass separated as stems, you could have a rhythm stem, which makes you have to export the drums and the bass together. So you could create a new bus that's just called the rhythm bus or something like that. And instead of that having to be in your chain of it goes, from the drums into the rhythm bus and then into the instrumental bus and then into the mix, you can now just send it instead. These are completely independent of one another. So if I did exactly that, let's say I make that rhythm bus, I can send the drums and the bass just to the rhythm bus. It doesn't matter. And now that they are sent to the rhythm bus, this rhythm bus doesn't go anywhere. It's simply just going to export exactly as it is. That is so powerful if you need to create all of these different kinds of deliverables. Okay, so now that you have this incredible routing option, how do we hear it? This is where things get fun. And I know fun is not a great term to use here, but for real, it's kind of fun. So you're gonna select all of your mix options, right? Our instrumental mix and the master bus that we created, or whatever other mix summing buses you need. And we're going to create a send for the monitor. Now you watched me actually route all of these individual stems into these buses, okay? But if I hit play, we hear nothing. And as you can see, there's signal running through this mix bus, and the instrumental bus is getting it, the mix bus is getting it. In fact, I'm gonna let the master get it too. But how do you hear this? We simply create those monitor sends, and then we just turn one on when we wanna hear it. So let's say I just wanna hear the instrumental. I'm gonna click on the monitor for the instrumental, and there we go. There's the instrumental. Let's say we want to hear the overall mix. Or we want to hear our master. And I'm even going to add the vocal bus because I don't have like an acapella bus, like a total sum of the vocals themselves. But I'm going to send that to the monitor and I can hear just the vocals. We're parked in an alley. This is so powerful for a lot of different reasons. And the biggest one isn't just the exporting. It is allowing you essentially to just mix the way you hear it, the way you perceive it. I no longer have to think about the routing. I no longer have to think about the end game of whatever this person needs. I know that once this is sounding really good, let's say I'm listening to just the mix, I'm like, okay, I can just send the mix off. It's good. Whatever is going into the mix is also going to sound great in the other buses, like the instrumental or the rhythm or something. And if that's not how you work, you just want to hear the master at all times because maybe you've got like a compressor on the master or a limiter, something. It's all done for you. There's no more work needing to be done in order to create these deliverables for your clients, your artists. It's all done autonomously now. Our brains think of all of this routing in this way, where the drums have like a line. This is like an arrow line that goes into the instrumental bus. And then same thing goes with the bass and the guitars. Think of all of these little arrows and lines that go into a bus, right? And then that individual bus is then going to have lines and arrows and stuff that go into the next bus. It's going to have like this signal. It starts here, it makes a stop. We are avoiding that. And instead, we are like drawing a line, like a patch line. We're patching this into the instrumental. We're patching this, patching this. And then we're patching it here. We're going to make another patch. And then when you get into situations like the mix bus, We're patching it in two different places. We're patching it into the monitor so we can hear it, and then we're patching it into the master so that we can create a master. And we can keep doing that with pretty much anything. So right now, I just made a patch into the stereo out and a patch into the mix. They are independent of one another. Now I can just solo anything I want that goes into the monitor, and I don't necessarily even have to be that crazy. I can have the whole mix, let's say the mix group, go into the stereo out for my monitors, and I can just solo the drums, solo the bass, or I'll do the guitars. How cool is that? One thing I forgot to mention is that you can add plugins to your monitoring that don't affect your mix. For example, when I use my Apple EarPods, I need to adjust the high end and cut the low mids to get a more accurate monitor. When I export the final mix or master, however, that EQ doesn't even need to be bypassed because it isn't affecting the mix bus at all. This goes for any kind of monitoring if you're using IRs or something to fake different listening environments. And, as an added bonus, as long as all your sends are post-fader, you can utilize each channel's fader and mix like normal. So it doesn't really change the way you mix, it just gives you more flexibility at the end of the day. This is a great way to speed up not only your production time, but to also accurately export all of the things that your clients need. And if you don't know if it's for you, go ahead and load up your DAW, follow the steps in this video, and see what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I know this video was a little different. I'm Deven, and this is the Drastic Truth.